Good morning, guys, and welcome to Unique Not Different with me, Shamla. And today I have the honor of having Dr. Amy Polwood, who is an associate professor at the International Florida University. She's a cross-trained um, she's a cross-trained in social sciences with expertise in occupational health, occupational and social justice, occupational therapy, and disability studies. So good morning, Dr. Ward. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me today.
And it's a pleasure to have you to talk about access, holistic access, because the branch of studies that you do is truly interesting because you don't really hear it too much person studying those fields combined. So let's get straight into it. In terms of what inspired you to go into medical anthropology and occupational therapy as well as social justice, also disability studies, in terms of what inspired you to do it?
Boy, well, there's so many questions in that one question. So for me, it's been a long and windy road. Early on, I really wanted to be a medical doctor. I always thought I would be an obstetrician, and that was my passion, and that was the path that I was pursuing. But I was worried about standing out in a large field. You know, a lot of people desired to go to medical school, and I chose an alternative path. I decided to pursue anthropology as a pathway to medicine. But along the way, I found a passion for doing research and working with populations who found themselves at the margins in their communities. And so I pursued a doctoral degree in anthropology, thinking that, like most, PhD prepared individuals, that I would eventually go on and teach in the university system. But life happens, and our paths and our desires change. And I found myself working at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta when I acquired my own disability. And it was through that event that I changed courses. I stopped working mostly in the public health world and shifted to a more disability focus. Like many of us who go through our lives as able-bodied individuals, we don't give disability a lot of thought until somebody in our families experience a disability. And to be honest, it was exactly like that for myself. I didn't have a lot of people in my life at that time who had physical disabilities, even though I had worked for several over the course of my adult career. But when I found myself in a very uncomfortable employment setting as a newly disabled person, and as someone with education and access to insurance and the best doctors and the internet, I couldn't navigate the healthcare system. I couldn't find rehabilitative services. I didn't know what professional assistance I needed. And it was through my own personal experience that I charted a new path. I did an advanced degree in research and theory as it relates to occupational therapy, which is an allied health profession, that works with people with disabilities. And in the process of kind of refining myself, I did occupational therapy on myself unknowingly, but that was where the passion for disability came.
And through your various research and I guess interactions as an expert in your field, what is or are the major gaps you find in terms of access? And it don't have to be in terms of physical access, it could be in terms of mental access, in terms of access to therapy. What is the major access that persons with disability have?
The fundamental, I think, at a base level, it's stigma. It's fear of the unknown. It's this it's the way we move through the world, and it starts in childhood, because we see that when we bump into people across the disability spectrum in public spaces as children, children are inquisitive. They point, they ask questions.
Yeah.
And mommy and daddy says, shh, don't ask that, don't point, don't look, it's rude. And so kids learn from a very early age not to question why people are different. And we know that the world is made up of different people, and we're all better for our difference. But if we're sheltered from examining that difference, then people find themselves on the margin. So you're right, physical spaces and access to physical spaces is important, but that's fixable. But
Yeah.
that innate, or that fostered fear of saying the wrong thing. I think most people with disabilities would rather have somebody ask a question
Yeah.
than be ignored.
And coming back into that, right? And I also believe that the exposure leads to the cognitive dissonance and ability to develop the cognitive ability. And it is the only way to know something, right?
Right.
So what should persons do in order to bridge that gap to help persons from young age develop their cognitive ability and exposure to differences in society?
Well, people with disabilities have to be included. If people with disabilities are not in public spaces, if they're not in the supermarket, if they're not in preschools, if they're not at the beach, then there's no way to develop that conversation for people without disabilities to develop that recognition that, hey, wait a minute, this person might look a little bit different. They might move a little bit different. They might need assistance to do things that I can do without help. That doesn't make them less than, that just makes them somebody who is differently able and moves through the world in different ways. But because people have this fear of what they don't understand, and people are afraid of being shunned. Families don't want their children to be made fun of and bullied. And so when you have young children with disabilities, very often parents want to keep them home because they find that the larger world is not friendly to them.
So in this last minute or two that we have, right? What I know that you stayed in Trinidad and Tobago for a while. I think you're going back tomorrow.
I am, but I'm coming back. I just found out I'm coming back next spring.
Oh, that is awesome. So from your experience in Trinidad and Tobago, right? What are some differences you see in terms of or interacting with persons with disability as opposed to Florida in your state?
So, it's an interesting question, because one of the things that I've been looking at is what is the disability experience for Trinidadians across the lifespan? And to be honest, everywhere I go, I'm watching and making observations to myself, and I see very few people with disabilities out in public spaces. And I am constantly amazed when, you take a mental note. I think I've seen 4 people in wheelchairs. Mm-hmm. And I've seen people using canes, but there are certain disabilities labels, the way we identify people, but I've seen very few people across the 3.5 months that I've been here. And so it's hard to know, is it a COVID issue? Are people just still afraid to be out and about? Is it that people are sheltered at home because of experiences that they've had where they've felt discriminated against because of their disabilities? And there's discussions in the disability community about hierarchies. Is it easier to be a person with a physical disability versus a person who is neurodiverse in terms of how people are accepted in the community? And for many families of children with autism, they are afraid to bring their children out because if they have a meltdown, people think it's bad parenting. They don't understand because there's this assumption that you can look at a person and know they're autistic.
I know we are out of time, but that is really a valid point, that we don't see persons with disability out, and it really leads to hierarchy in terms of not only person's hierarchy, people hierarchy, but also in terms of access. And as this topic says, holistic access. And we in Trinidad still don't have that in terms of hearing access. So Ms. Ward, I want to say, Dr. Ward, I want to say thank you so much for taking your time and coming and sharing, your knowledge and your expertise with us. And I really hope to have you back again on our segment to delve further into, I guess, the different branches of the study. Right? So thank you so much. And
thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here.
It's a pleasure. And guys, with that being said, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in to this week's segment of Unique and Different. Until next week, as I always say, be good, do good. Bye, guys.